Earlier this year, I thru hiked the 223-mile Washita Trail, and I did it as a beginner hammocker. I had only taken this out twice, and on one of those times was when I made the video about why I changed my mind about hammocking. So, since that video did so well, especially for such a small YouTube channel like I have, I decided to go ahead and make a follow-up video to let you guys know how that went and the things I learned, and I'm also hoping that maybe it might help some beginners out. Let's go ahead and start with the tarp. Let's go ahead and start with the tarp. My tarp is a Hammock Gear DCF winter tarp with doors, and it is 12 foot. I got the snake skin to help wrangle it for packing and unpacking, and the suspension I'm using on it, I have just a piece of like Zing It, that arborist line, and then on each end of the tarp ridge area, I have a Dutchware stinger, which is kind of like one of those wasps, but it's attached to a carabiner, so you can attach it to a tarp easier. For managing the doors, I got a really cool idea off of Adventure Allen's website, and I'm going to post that link in the description below. But it uses some shock cord and some spring clips that I got off of, I think I got them off Dutchware. And you use that and you tie each door back together, and that keeps them out of the way. And it also kind of gives a nice little place to hang socks or whatever to air them out, because we know how those start smelling after a while. When you need to deploy the doors, all I would have to do is take each side apart, and then I run it over to the end, and I have another clip waiting, and so I can click that, and then I just have line locks so I could pull the door tight, and then I just follow the same thing with each other door. It really works well. My hammock is a 10-foot hammock from Dream Hammock, and I picked that one because it's lightweight and has good headroom. The rule with hammocks is that the longer it is, the more comfortable it is. And mine's only 10 foot, but I'm only 5 foot tall, so I can get away with that short of a hammock. For anyone much taller, it's probably not going to be very comfortable. But it did help me reduce some of the weight that's going into my pack. For my suspension, I have pretty much copied the suspension system out of Shug's playbook. It is a Dutchware spider strap with a sewn-in Dutch clip. And then I am using a toggle with a marlin spike knot. And then on that, I take the whoopee sling that's on my hammock and I attach it over the toggle. So it works really good. It gives me a lot of wiggle room as far as how far apart trees are. Just before the thru hike, I had looked at these. These are the DCF straps from Myers Tech Hammock Lab. And they are really, really light, and I liked them. But the only problem with them was that we all know that DCF it's kind of has some issues with abrasion. It's not very strong against that. So I had some concerns about that, and I got on a hammock forum and asked people, hey, do you guys have any experience with these? And did you find them abrading? And seriously? And people said no, they didn't. Some people had done entire thru hikes with them. But in the end, I just got nervous about it, because if these had broke on my thru hike, it would have been a really bad day. So I ended up going with the spider straps from Dutchware. And one of the other reasons was because the Dutchware spider straps are thicker. So they gave them some more rigidity. And if I had to deal with a tree, because like I said, I'm short, if I had to deal with a tree where I really had to hang it high, I could kind of swing it up into place, where the other really lightweight ones, I wasn't able to do that. So I've got the spider strap with the Dutch clip, with the toggle, with the marlin spike, with the whoopee sling thrown over it, and that's just a whole lot of words and stuff. And I'm just going to link Shug's video in the video description, because he does a whole lot better job explaining it than I ever could. What's next? Under the hammock, I have a Hammock Gear Incubator 10-degree underquilt, and I picked the 10-degree because I am a really cold sleeper. So that one, it just works great, and I'm plenty comfortable in it. Dealing with the underquilt, it does take some adjustment and stuff. So one of the things that was a really good time saver was the Anaconda from Trailheads. It is pretty much like a snake skin that would go on your tarp, except this goes over the hammock and the underquilt and everything. So when I would get to camp, all I had to do was hang up that big tube and then pull back the anaconda, and then poof, there is my quilt. The anaconda is actually big enough that you can put your top quilt in the hammock also, and it'll still go over all that once you compress it down. Then you just shove the whole thing in your pack. Or they make one with a DCF stuff sack sewn to the end, and then you just push the whole thing into it. I found out halfway through the through hike that it was just easier for me to put the top quilt down into my pack. I stuffed it into the very bottom where it was taking up all those little unused spaces. And then on top of that, I would put the anaconda in and then squish that down. So now let's talk about the things that I learned and how things changed from the beginning of the through hike to the end of the through hike. And the first one that really sticks out in my head is it was taking me a lot longer to get my stuff set up at camp than it did my duplex. And the duplex, if you're not familiar with it, it's a tent from Z-Packs, and it's a trekking pole tent, and it uses line tension. So it does take a bit of fiddling with, but I also had a lot of practice with it. I've had it for several years. So I knew that that had a lot to do with why it was taking me longer to get the hammock set up. But as things went on, I got better at pacing trees, and pacing the trees was important because it helped me find out if the trees were too far apart or too close together, and have me halfway set up and then realize this isn't going to work and now I got to go find different trees. So once I got that figured out, I was able to pick my trees really quick, and then I was able to get the hammock hung up really quick, make a few adjustments because I got a lot more proficient with making those adjustments. And a lot of times the trees, I just couldn't find ideal trees, and I really learned the hang doesn't have to be perfect. It needs to be comfortable. So sometimes if you do a bad hang all the time, it can tend to put different stresses on the hammock that aren't good for it. But one night, if it's not ideal, it's okay. And a lot of times, the fiddle factor with hammocking is really high. And luckily, I like to fiddle with things. But after a long day on the trail, I would just kind of mess with it. If it wasn't ideal, you know what, I would just deal with it, and I still slept good, a lot better than I did on the ground. So a good example of this, we had a really bad storm came in, and they were talking hail, possible tornadoes, so we decided to hike into a shelter. Well, this was one of the older shelters on the Ouachita Trail, and the area between where I would have the head end of my hammock and the foot end of my hammock was only about maybe 8 or 9 feet. And my hammock is a 10-foot hammock. So I went ahead and made it work. It kind of ended up looking like a saggy ball sack, but luckily I tend to sleep in the fetal position, kind of crunched up in a ball even in my bed at home. So I was just in a little ball down at the bottom of that. It wasn't pretty, but I could have hung the other way in this shelter and been able to get a good hammock hang, but it was really bad trail etiquette because if other people had worked hard to get to that shelter to be sheltered from the storm, and then here I am taking up the whole place because I have my hammock hung wrong. So I wanted to make sure to hang it in a way that wasn't taking up any more space than somebody with a pad and a sleeping bag on the floor. Okay, so another thing, I ended up with a cold spot in my underquilt. And if you guys are already hammockers, you know what I'm talking about. So I would get it multiple times and check the rigging on it, adjust tension on it, adjust anything else I could think to adjust, and I could not get rid of this cold spot that was literally right under my butt. Well, my husband will confirm I have a really cold ass. So that's all it was, is because, just like your top quilt, your body heat is what's heating up the underquilt. And my cold ass was not heating up that spot. So I just had to wait a little bit longer, and then eventually it warmed up. But if it was already cold and I was tired and I just wanted to get to sleep, I found out that using my sit pad. Wait. Here it is. What of these? This is the Thermarest Z seat, and it has the silver coating on one side to kind of help reflect heat. And it really did a good job of just warming up my butt so I could get to sleep. Another one was because I had a tent mindset, and in a tent, you have all kinds of privacy. You just close it when you get dressed. There's not much privacy here. So even with the tarp, it's still not a whole lot of privacy. So I just got over it. that's all it was. And my poor hiking friend, Humpty Dumpty, she probably dreaded every night at camp because I had got over it. She saw a whole lot more of my flabby white ass than she probably cared to. But I was tired and I didn't care. So sticking with that tent mentality, another thing that I kind of struggled with in the beginning was organization. Because, like, in your tent you have everything right there. Well, that doesn't really work in the hammock. So I just had to drop that tent mentality eventually and only bring into the hammock what I would need in the hammock. So to help with organization, I got some things for the hammock that helped. So I have 2 peak bags, which go at the gathered end of each end of the hammock. And then I also have a ridgeline organizer. In the peak bag at the foot of the hammock, I keep things that I probably won't need till the morning. And then in the middle, I have a ridgeline organizer. It has all these little pockets where I could keep hot hands and stuff. And then at the other end, at the head end, I have one where I keep things that I might need during the night, like my down booties, my eye mask. And I know it sounds all bougie and stupid, but when you have that full hunter's moon overhead blaring straight down on you, man, it is like staring into the headlights of a truck. So I have a very lightweight eye mask, and I just put that on, and it is great. So I had mentioned before that it took a little bit earlier in the evening to get set up, but it also took longer in the morning. And the main reason for that was that in my tent, I could drink my coffee and set it down and pack some stuff, and then have another sip of coffee and set it back down. There's no place to set it down in here, so I kind of tried different ways, and it just didn't work. So what ended up happening, I just had to get up earlier, and then I just instead appreciated the time to just sit there and drink my coffee, all nice and comfy in my hammock, and listen to the birds waking up. And it was turned into just being a really nice chill time of the day for me. As I progressed further into the through hike and after probably about the second week or so, I was able to move around really easily inside that hammock. At first, when I first started working with it, it felt all wobbly and like I couldn't balance in it. By the end of the through hike, I could sit in that thing Indian style and reach around and do stuff and drink my coffee at the same time. And I could at least start kicking things out of the hammock and onto the ground by my pack, like my inReach and stuff that I was going to need during the day. So that actually made things go faster. Another thing that helped things go faster was that I just took my sleep clothes off and I just leave them in the hammock. That made things go a lot faster because I really didn't worry a whole lot about organization. I just anything that was left in the hammock that I didn't need while I was hiking, I just put the whole hammock away with it. So when I took it back out in the evening, I'd open it up, then I could do something with it then when I had more time to kill. So another thing that happened is we had several nights that were at or below freezing. And we have different pieces of gear that we need to take care of in freezing temperatures, like our water filters. And if you don't know, if your water filter freezes, it's junk. The little filtering capillaries inside rupture, and you may have water flowing through it, but it is no longer filtering. So that's something that I would protect, and also my electronics, because cold can tend to sap the charge out of them. Or should I say suck the charge out of them? So I would take my water filter and put it in a Ziploc bag that went inside of another little stuff sack. It was one of those little bags that comes with something I bought. And I put that in there, and then I put all my electronics and stuff in it. So, what we always do, we throw that down at the foot box of our sleeping bag or our quilt. Well, in this, I kind of have my feet elevated a little bit because I like to sleep that way. It kind of helps them unswell a little bit. Is that a word? Anyway, unswell, we'll go with it. And as I was sleeping and then rolling around and getting into my little fetal position, all of a sudden, here comes that bag of stuff, and I'd wake up like, what hurts my back? And that freaking whole bag of all that stuff was underneath me. So I was trying to figure out how to make that stop happening or what to do with these things. And all I could come up with, my quilt has a cinch thing on the bottom of it because it can either be opened up into a blanket, or I can use a little zipper at the bottom and cinch it up to suck the bottom together, so that way I could take that little drawstring and shove it down into the inside of the quilt, and then inside of that I tied the bag to it, so at least it would stay somewhat in my foot area and not come all the way down to the bottom of the hammock, right there by my cold ass. I don't know if there's a better way to do that, or if you guys have any suggestions on how you handle your freeze protected items during cold weather while you're in a hammock. So if you do have some good ideas, let me know in the comments, because I'm still trying to figure out what's the right way to do that, but that worked well enough to get me through the cold week of our through hike. So that's really the main things that I learned. As far as like what gear would I change, man, if I had to pick two things, I would say the tarp. I had mentioned at the beginning of this that I got a 12-foot tarp. While it was really nice and I had all kinds of room inside of it, when we had a really bad thunderstorm while we were halfway up a mountain, it did great, and I was really happy to have all that extra length. But it really kind of hindered me on what kind of trees I could use, because I might have found two trees that were great for my 10-foot hammock, but the 12-foot tarp was too long for them and I wouldn't be able to use those. So it kind of really limited me on where I could hang. So if I had it to do over, I would get an 11-foot tarp. And then my other thing, back to organization. You can, when you put together your custom build of what you want on your hammock, you can have pockets sewn on the inside. And I don't remember why I didn't do that. It was probably like, oh, that's probably too heavy. It's like 3 grams. I don't know. But I ended up not doing it. And man, I wish I had. In fact, if I could have had them put one on each side, I would have done it, because a lot of times you're just doing stuff in there and I'll set something down by my hip and I'll turn it and I'll just go and do something, and then I squirrel out and then I'm like, oh, I'm going to do this over here. And then next thing I know, it's gone. I don't know where it went. So if it could be something just like to have a little pocket and just put that in that pocket, do what I need to do, squirrel out, and then come back to it and it's still in that pocket and I'm not searching around all under my cold ass trying to find it. So that's the other thing. I would have got pockets put on the inside of the hammock. So that's about all I have. I hope you found some of this stuff helpful. And if you're interested in hiking the Ouachita Trail, I have a series on my channel about how to hike the Ouachita Trail, where I took my camera along the entire trail to show you everything you need to know. If you're not interested in hiking the trail, but you're interested in what our through hike experience was like, there's a video on there. It's about half-hour long for the whole entire trail, and it's called 223 Mile Ouachita Trail Through Hike. So I hope you check it out. Another thing is, when I did the video about why I changed my mind with hammocking, I got a lot of really great comments and people telling their stories and the ways that they changed their mind about it and how they got into hammocking. And it was really neat to read all those stories. So if you guys have some really great stories that go along with anything that I've covered in this video, please put them in the comments, because I really love reading that stuff. Anyway, that's about it. I'm going to shut up now. Bye. Wait. Don't forget to subscribe.